my big talking point. Why did Nikhil Gupta then plead guilty in a US court? Is this a secret operation that went wrong and India cannot in any way acknowledge it? Was this a mission run by a rogue officer? Is this a real life Dhurandhar case, a risk, or is it worth it? Can the government of India distance itself from such a plot when the US claims they have confirmed evidence of it? Joining me now, Dr. Karta is former Director, National Security Council Secretariat, Singh, former Indian diplomat, and Glenn Carle is former officer in CIA's Directorate of Operations, author The Interrogator. I appreciate all of you joining us. Karta, your first reactions to the Nikhil Gupta case and the fact that he's made this confession and the US statement which says that he did it on the bidding of an Indian government official.
My first reaction was that right at the beginning was that this was another David Headley. He's a DA agent. You've got tons of these DA guys, they're moles roaming around doing their secret operations for them. And this is documented in the US National Security Archives where DEA agents were involved in, those cases. In the Contra scandal in Afghanistan, that was my immediate reaction. But I want to say something here. This character, Gurpat Singh Pannun, he was fully operative when we knew about this guy, right? He was a joke. If anybody had told me, listen, we need to assassinate this guy, I would have fallen off my chair laughing. He was simply not worth it. That is my view. As there are hundreds of others, and I'm not going to name them.
So then why? So are you saying this entire story has been cooked up by the US at the highest level?
No. I'm not saying that at all. If you trace it, which I have done, date by date, there was the killing of Niger. I mean, look at that document which you're quoting. This guy tells this undercover agent that, don't kill Niger just now because Prime Minister's coming. 2 days before PM visits, Niger is killed. Then he tells him, now you go ahead. I mean, how ridiculous is that? Niger is fine. As of, in fact, 3 days ago, one couple from Canada has fled Canada because of extortion threats by the Bishnoi and one more Bimbihar gang. There are 2-3 gangs, not 2-3, right. There's lots more. That's just 3 days ago. So that gang warfare has been going on for decades. That is intertwined with narcotics. Okay, so that whole thing is operating there, and that for some reason, now this is what I want to know. Who actually killed him 2 days before the Prime Minister was to arrive in the US? Somebody bumps off Niger. Okay, so I want to know more about that. Okay. And then this guy says, okay, let's go bump off Pannun now. Pannun was not worth killing.
Let me take what you are saying to Glenn Carle. He's a former officer in CIA's Directorate. As you are seeing, there's skepticism in India over this US Department of Justice investigation. Their report suggesting that this was an operation carried out by Nikhil Gupta, hired an assassin at the behest of a government officer, Mr. Yadav. Could he have been a plant, as is being suggested?
No, it's extremely unlikely that be the case. The evidence is from multiple sources. The Department of Justice doesn't take any instructions from the CIA or the DEA or the NSA, which seems to have intercepted some communications. So the critical question is the motive. What motive would there be for the United States or part of the United States to do this? None of that adds up at all. The pattern of events and responses by the various governments and players is classic, however. If a government gets caught in an intelligence operation that has gone wrong, then of course it will say, oh my goodness, Glenn Carle he wasn't following orders. He seems to have lost his head. He was a rogue. He had his own partisan, personal objectives he was trying to pursue under the umbrella of the United States, when in fact, no, we would never have anything to do with this. Oh, so sorry. And that's exactly what the Indian government has said, which is the standard thing that one does when one gets caught in an intelligence operation. You change the subject, deny, and then remain silent. That's what happened. And the United States, in this instance, has simply done some police and intelligence work, the two overlapping in this case. And if the man why would he have pled guilty? I do not know the twists and turns of the trial and the process, but most likely he was offered or presented with uh, alternative futures, which is if you plead guilty, your sentence will be probably much shorter. You might be pardoned
Right.
or released for good behavior, and if not, you'll be stuck in prison for much, much longer.
Let me bring in Casey Singh. Casey Singh, either way, this is an embarrassment. Now, you could argue this was an intelligence operation that went wrong, so the government has no option but to say that Nikhil Gupta is a rogue, you distance yourself from him. Or the fact is that this is now part of our policy that we are looking, whether it's the Nijjar case or the Pannun case, we are possibly entering a very, very dangerous terrain, which when it goes wrong, it becomes embarrassing.
Well, let's look at it. It first began with Canada. A relationship went completely downhill. Of course, Prime Minister Trudeau was at fault because he jumped the gun and leveled an allegation when he didn't have documentation at that stage. In retrospect, it appears the Americans had passed on the information. I think they were monitoring what Gupta was doing, and as yet, because they had not grabbed him, they were not willing to give all the information. They're keeping Canadians from sharing any details. So the Indian thing was the Canadians are leveling charges without any information. Now, since then, a relationship with Canada. Now, why would two governments, one after the other, come after India on this particular subject? No, I'm not saying the government of India is involved, but certainly it requires some examination, some investigation at end. There were some reports in the media that one officer has retired and he's no longer with a particular agency. Whatever it is, if somebody went rogue, because after all, the Americans have phone numbers, their agents claim to have spoken to the Indian person handling Gupta, etc. Let's share the information. They should share the information, find out whose phone was being used, from where were these calls made. We've heard nothing from the Indian side. So the way
So
to handle
why are the
this,
Americans going seemingly out of their way to make this a case wherein they want to directly implicate India?
look, as you just now heard, it's the Department of Justice. And Americans would like a lever to keep you pressed. And if there is a confession by Gupta, they may have more information. And that information can be used slyly in your bilateral relations. That is a problem in a case like this. That if it goes higher up the chain, then it becomes a pressure point. That's why it's important for India to conduct an investigation and make the outcome public and say this is the person, these were the phone calls, and this is the person who's involved, and you'll have to try him. Otherwise, tomorrow the Americans may ask for his extradition. That complicates things further. But if you're trying a person, you can say we are trying him for a crime here. So there's no question of extraditing him. We haven't done that. We don't even know if there's such a person. So if the Americans are lying and the agencies have no information, then we should say so. But if they are saying that a particular person was making phone calls, it was after all going from some number. After all, $15,000 have been passed, etc. So who made that money available? Gupta would be answering that.
Can I just bring in?
Yeah.
I've heard you. Can I just bring in Tara Kanta at this point? Tara Kanta, you see, the details of this case is what should worry India, surely. I mean, as is being said, you can never acknowledge a secret operation that's gone wrong given the stakes involved. But it almost seems as if India has decided that, we don't want to touch Nikhil Gupta, even as Nikhil Gupta seems to be perhaps only exposing more and more details.
No, I think I was slightly misunderstood. I didn't say that the US was trying to get us into a hole. I mean, maybe they are, but that's not what I said. But I'm just saying that, see, we cooperated with them on this so-called this Yadav case. There was, unlike Canada, which didn't present us with any evidence and just kept ranting in public, the US did quietly give us some details and there was a lot of cooperation going on. That guy, I think, was subsequently arrested for an extortion case, again involving
Yeah,
the
so that he
Vishnu
could not be
and all
extradited. You
that
see,
stuff.
that's the question. The US wants him extradited. We are not, we put out another case so that we can avoid
Yeah, but
extradition.
see, the thing is, okay, that is, yeah, maybe that's true. But an assistant commandant in a CRPF attached to RAW, who was at the time involved in a case for his promotion in CAT, he carries out an assassination. I mean, it is so unbelievable that it's like a what shall I say? I can't think how it possibly could happen. That's why
Okay.
I'm saying there is something we are missing out.
What
I'm
is
not
what
saying
is
the
that?
US is
Okay, you're
right.
saying there's something that's missing. Let me take that to my guest from the United States, Glenn Carle. Glenn, does this happen often? Could this, what is it that we are missing in all of this? It seems rather bad. An assistant commandant of CRPF is hiring someone who's supposedly a businessman. He pays off someone in the United States to carry on this operation of Pannun, who's not necessarily someone who's India's most wanted. Why do you think this would happen? What are we missing?
Well, that's a good question. First, I think Ambassador Singh raised a point that I think is worth expanding on a little bit, that bears on your question just a second, which is that there's a good possibility that the Mr. Gupta is serving as a circuit breaker at this point by pleading guilty. That in the negotiations or discussions between the prosecutors and Gupta and his defense attorneys, and then indirectly with the Indian government, of course, uh, it could well have been said that, well, listen, we have, as quite clearly seems to be the case, the intercepts of telephone calls and telephone numbers and names of people, and we can fit them into the structures of the RAW's operations or the governments and so on. And we don't really want to have all of this blow up and get worse and worse and worse. And so it would be a wise thing for Mr. Gupta to plead guilty and put an end to this. And that fits with the standard pattern of the Indian government's response, which is, oh my goodness, this is a rogue and let's turn our eyes to something else because it just couldn't possibly happen. End of story. That's the first part. The second part, what is we missing? And that's another good question. Assassinations are really sexy in the movies and so on, but they have so many fraught possibilities and unintended consequences that
Right.
usually come to pass in some way beyond the control of the perpetrating government, that they are really unwise things to do. And it's taken, no one will believe what I say now, but it's taken as an article of faith that the CIA runs around the world assassinating people, but that is not true. It is true in
Okay.
1942 that the U.S. Provided a weapon that assassinated a French official during World War II, and that we tried to assassinate Castro, miserably failing. The targeted killings are clearly lethal operations, but are not the same as hiring a hitman to kill someone. And there is a clear assessment made that the costs so dramatically outweigh the benefits that it becomes just what you say, a question of, well, why in the world would
Right.
someone do this? Now, it does seem, however, and this I don't know for a fact, but it does seem that the RAW or the Indian government in recent years, very recently, in the last several years, in the last part of Modi's time in office, has become more aggressive in this kind of uh, operation against dissidents and separatists and so on. So that
Okay.
does seem to be the case.
Okay, that's a thought you're leaving us with. I appreciate my guest joining us. Clearly, this is a case which leaves plenty of questions unanswered, and we hope that we will get some clarity. Remember, this is not a real life Dhurandhar case, because this is actually a case that has possibly blown up in the face of the Indian government. I appreciate my guest, though, joining me on my talking point.